The gavel fell like a gunshot, and in that single crack of sound, her old life died. Every promise, every prayer, every lie she'd told herself about love, because the final bid wasn't for land or cattle or even a horse, but for her. And as the crowd exhaled in a breath thick with dust and judgment, she realized with a cold, sinking clarity that survival sometimes comes wearing chains you never see until they're locked around your wrists. Her name was Eliza May Hart, and the day she was auctioned off began the same way every terrible thing begins, quietly. Dawn crept over the plains like a reluctant witness, lighting the edges of the town of Red Willow in a soft gold that felt like mockery. Eliza stood at the small window of the boarding house room, fingers pressed to the glass, watching dust swirl down Main Street as wagons arrived. The auction had been posted for weeks, nailed to the church door and the saloon wall, written in stiff black ink that reduced a marriage to a balance sheet. To settle the debts of Thomas Hart, deceased, assets to be sold, livestock, equipment, and, when the money still wouldn't add up, his wife. Thomas hadn't meant to ruin her. She told herself that over and over, as if repetition could sand the edges off the truth. He had been charming once, with hands that smelled of hay and hope, a laugh that filled rooms, and dreams bigger than the sky. But charm curdles when fed on whiskey, and dreams rot when watered with bad luck and worse decisions. The drought came, then the fire, then the loans. Eliza stitched dresses for women who pitied her, and cooked meals for men who pretended not to look at her with that particular kind of hunger. Thomas borrowed again and again. When he died, horse spooked, rope tangled, neck snapped like dry kindling, he left her a ledger full of red ink and a town that didn't know what to do with a widow who owed more than she owned. They tried to be kind at first. The banker cleared his throat and spoke of arrangements. The sheriff avoided her eyes. The preacher prayed for her soul. But kindness is thin when money is owed, and in Red Willow there was a precedent older than mercy. A wife could be sold into service, legal, they said, because she was an asset of the household. She could be bought for a term, bound by contract to work, to obey, to repay with her labor what her husband couldn't with his life. Eliza wore a blue dress she'd mended so many times the fabric was more memory than cloth. She braided her hair because it felt like armor. As she stepped onto the wooden platform beside the livestock pens, she kept her eyes on the horizon, on the way the land stretched on forever, as if to remind herself that the world was bigger than this moment. Still, when the auctioneer cleared his throat and read her name, something in her chest splintered. The bids came cautious at first. A farmer with a red face offered a low amount, eyes already measuring her strength. A ranch foreman raised it, calculating years of labor. A man from the next county laughed and said something that made her skin crawl. Each number stripped another layer of dignity, and Eliza felt herself shrinking, folding inward to survive. Then a voice cut through the murmurs, low and steady like wind through tall grass. Double. Heads turned. He stood near the fence, hat tipped low, boots worn, the coat the color of dust in storms. He didn't smile, he didn't leer, he simply watched the auctioneer, as if this were a matter of business and nothing more. The bids jumped, the crowd buzzed, the man didn't flinch. He raised the offer again and again until the others fell away, shaking their heads. The final gavel strike echoed, sealing her fate, and the auctioneer called the name on the ledger. Mr. Jonah Cole. Jonah Cole, the cowboy everyone knew and no one truly did. He ran a spread out west near the river, kept to himself, paid his debts on time, and rode like he'd been born in the saddle. Eliza had seen him in town only a handful of times, usually alone. He had a scar along his jaw and eyes that held a tired kindness she didn't trust. They handed him the contract, thick paper stamped and signed. The crowd dispersed, already forgetting her, already moving on to the next transaction. Eliza stood frozen until Jonah approached. Up close, he smelled of leather and sun. He held the paper loosely, like it weighed nothing at all. "You ready?" he asked, voice careful, as if any wrong inflection might break her. Ready? For what? A new cage? A different kind of debt? She nodded because nodding was easier than speaking. He gestured towards his horse, then stopped. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something flickered behind his eyes, something like anger braided with sorrow. Without a word, Jonah Cole tore the contract in half. The sound of paper ripping was small, almost fragile, but it felt louder than the gavel had. He tore it again and again until the stamped signatures fell like dead leaves at his feet. The crowd gasped. Someone swore. The auctioneer sputtered. Jonah dropped the pieces into the dirt and ground them under his boot. "She's not owned," he said, voice carrying. "Not by me, not by anyone." For a heartbeat, the world hung suspended. Eliza's knees nearly gave out. "What are you doing?" she whispered, terrified that hope would make this worse. "Buying time," Jonah said quietly, "and your freedom." The banker pushed forward, face flushed. "You can't just, this is legal." "I paid the debt, every cent, and if there's a problem, you can take it up with me." The sheriff shifted, uncertain. The preacher stared. The auctioneer swallowed his words. Money has a way of smoothing objections, and Jonah's payment had been more than enough. The crowd, denied their spectacle, drifted away, disappointed. Eliza stood there, shaking, as if the ground beneath her had become water. Jonah offered his arm, not touching her unless she moved first. "You don't owe me anything," he said, "but if you want to ride out of town, I can offer that." "Why?" she asked. It was the only question that mattered. He considered, eyes narrowing against the sun. "Because once a man saved me when he didn't have to, and because I won't see another person turned into a ledger entry." She followed him because staying felt impossible. They rode west as the town shrank behind them, its judgments dissolving into dust. Eliza kept expecting the world to snap back, to reveal the trick, but the road kept stretching on, and Jonah rode beside her, silent, steady. The Cole Ranch sat where the river bent like an elbow, cottonwoods whispering secrets. Jonah showed her a small cabin, clean and bright. "You can stay as long as you need," he said. "There's work if you want it, fair pay, or you can leave tomorrow." She laughed then, a broken sound that surprised both of them. Leave, as if she had somewhere to go, as if the world hadn't just shown her how easily it could sell her. "I'll stay," she said, because staying felt like choosing, and that mattered. The days settled into a rhythm. Eliza cooked and mended by choice, not obligation. She learned the land, the way the river rose and fell, the habits of the horses. Jonah kept his distance, respectful to a fault. At night she lay awake listening to coyotes sing and wondered at the strange ache in her chest, gratitude tangled with fear, relief braided with mistrust. Jonah watched her too from the corners of his life. He noticed the way she moved like she was always braced for impact, the way she flinched at raised voices, the careful way she asked permission for things she didn't need to ask for. He carried his own ghosts. Years ago, he'd been younger and angrier, chasing a man who'd wronged his family. He found vengeance instead of justice, and the cost had been a friend's life. Since then, he paid debts that weren't written anywhere, trying to balance a scale only he could see. One evening, a storm rolled in fast, lightning splitting the sky. Eliza was caught in the barn when the thunder cracked, sending the horses into a frenzy. Panic surged, memories of fire, of chaos. She froze, heart hammering. Jonah was there in seconds, moving with calm authority, his voice steady. He guided her out, his hand a warm anchor on her back, not pushing, just present. Outside, rain soaked both of them, and when it passed, Eliza realized she was crying. "I'm sorry," she said, embarrassed. "Nothing to be sorry for," Jonah replied. He handed her his coat. "Storms pass. Some leave marks. Doesn't mean you did anything wrong." Trust crept in like dawn, slow and cautious. Eliza began to smile again, real smiles that reached her eyes. She told Jonah about Thomas, not the myth of the man she'd loved, but the truth of the one she'd lost. Jonah listened without judgment. He told her about his mistake, about the night that haunted him. They didn't touch, not like that. The space between them was a promise neither rushed. But the world doesn't like loose ends. Word reached Red Willow that Jonah Cole had made enemies by tearing up a legal contract. A creditor named Marcus Bell came calling, a man with a smile sharp as a blade. He arrived with papers and threats, claiming Jonah had interfered, that Eliza still owed service, that the debt had not been properly settled. Fear tried to reclaim Eliza, whispering that safety was temporary. Jonah stood between her and Bell, unyielding. "You have no claim here," he said. Bell sneered. "We'll see what the court says." The weeks that followed were heavy with waiting. Jonah prepared, gathering receipts, witnesses, every scrap of proof. Eliza wanted to run, to spare him the trouble. He wouldn't hear